Welcome to Sew Very Easy. My name is Laura, and let's use up some scraps. How about 5-inch squares and 2-inch strips of fabric? So we need to start off with 5-inch squares. For every 5-inch square, we're going to need 1 strip of fabric, 2 inches by 8.5 inches. You can even do 9 inches. We're also going to need 2 more white squares. Because these are cut at 2, I'm going to cut mine at 2 inches. But if you have leftover 1-inch squares or 1.5-inch squares, you're going to be able to use these. We just need to be consistent on this size. So if you're going to use 1.5, it will be throughout the entire quilt. But I will be using the 2-inch. So for every square of fabric, this is what we're needing. We're going to take those squares of fabric and cut them all in half on the diagonal. So I have a pile of my triangles. This long end is the end that I'm going to be stitching on, and we don't need to keep them in order because we will be mixing them up. But what we need to do is divide that pile, whatever you have, in half. So one part of the triangle is going to get stitched on that 2-inch by 8.5, and the other is going to get stitched on there. And we do want to mix and match these. Now there are a few ways that we can center these on. If you just take that and give that a little bit of a fold, you're going to have a little crease mark. You can do the same thing right here with that triangle. And we're going to match up those seams. And we can do the same for the second side. So that's the block that we're looking at. I would recommend to stitch these 2 seams with a very scant 1/4 inch. Now we're going to press them and square them up. Press them so the seams are all going in the same direction. With those seams going in one direction, we're going to be able to square up this block. I do want to square it to a 5.5-inch square. I started with the 5. I added this piece in the center. Now I'm going to square it to 5.5 inches. So it's going to be pretty close to 5.5 inches, but I do want my square point to point being in the center of this white, and that way my blocks are going to go together. And that's where having those seams going all in the same direction will help. I'm going to be able to take this block, fold it in half, and this seam will nestle up. I want to match them. And I can feel that those are matched up. It's not important if this is matched up. We need those 2 lines matched up instead. So make sure they're matched up and just give it a finger press. Now I do want to trim this to 5.5 inches. If I have a 5.5-inch ruler, I could just put each of those points on the fold and cut. But I don't have a 5.5-inch ruler, so I'm going to use a larger ruler. And you can use any size ruler as long as it's bigger than 5.5 inches. I will need the 5.5-inch mark on each side of that ruler, and I'm going to place it on that fold. So I have 5.5 inches is right here, and 5.5 inches marks there. So if I wanted to do a 6-inch, 7-inch, whatever I wanted to do, as long as I have those points on the fold, it's going to work out fine. You can see there's really not a lot to trim off, and that's why using that scant 1/4 inch will definitely be helpful. Now I can trim off that extra. With that extra gone, when I open it up, those points are in the center, and it's 5.5 inches. And that's where I was able to use those 5.5-inch marks on the ruler. So all of the blocks will need to be trimmed down to 5.5 inches. So my squares are all random, and they're 5.5 inches. I'm going to add on some cornerstones. So on each of these corners, I'm going to add the white square. And this is where you could have the 2-inch, 1.5 inches, an inch. As long as all of the blocks are the same, you're going to be fine. So we're going to put those squares so that the right sides are touching. Draw a line from corner to corner, and then we're going to stitch on that line. So once those corners are stitched on, when we fold them back, the square did not change in size. We just added some white. So we can trim off that 1/4 inch. And then when we press them, we're going to keep pressing in that same direction. So this is what that cute little finished block is going to look like. So depending on these squares, this size is going to change, but they all need to be the same because we're going to put them together now. So we end up with this square shape. And let's look at the back and see how those seams are going to go together. We can sew these together in 4 patches, or you can sew them together in long rows. When we do sew those blocks together, we're going to have the seams going in one direction, and this is going to come in the opposite direction. So these seams are opposite, which means they're going to match together. So when I match them, all of those seams are going to nestle together. As we're stitching, we just want to make sure that those seams are nestled up. So just kind of give it a little tug and a little pull just to make sure that they match up. And when they do, we have that beautiful V shape. Now I'm going to be able to match this 4 together. These seams are going to match, so I just need to make sure these are going in opposite directions so I can nestle those up. So this is now our finished block. That is our one block. So we have the 4 blocks. When they're put together, we do have that square in a square shape, and it now looks like they're sashing running along each side. So I've done them in sets of 4 and have put them together. And that means we get that secondary 4 patch. So that was one, and this was the other, and there's that second patch that's put on. So you can see where this could really be a great scrap buster. If you sew them in rows, you will just have the blocks going in the zigzag formation, but when you get the second row put on, it gives you that block. It's a great scrap buster, and it could be made in all sorts of fabric. So those scraps of fabric really do turn out to be a quick and easy project. And it looks like there's sashing on this. You really don't notice how you've made the blocks. It just looks like sashing. Now each of these squares will end up being a 5-inch finished square. So you could do the math and make as many as you want. Make it square, make it rectangle, make it for a baby. Well, it's a good way of using up those 5-inch squares. I think I might put a border on this and then get it quilted. Thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe on my Facebook, Instagram, and I have a newsletter. It's all under Sew Very Easy. I hope you give it a try. Bye for now.